Welcome back, everyone, to the Time to Be You podcast. I'm so excited about our guest today, Janne Denton-Howes. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Yeah, can't wait to see what we get into.
We have a special conversation today, you guys. We're going to talk a little bit about marriage and sex. Yeah, we're going to talk about it. That's what we're going to do.
Word.
Yep, I said it. Oh my God.
The hardest part is over.
I know, and I said it very quietly. So, Janne, for everyone that doesn't know you, can you just give a little background of what you do and what your business is all about?
Sure. I am a marriage coach, and as you mentioned, I do specialize in sexuality. Primarily, I help women with low libido who have been married and usually have kids. I also specialize in the male brain, which I find is fascinating and exciting, and I run another program called Marriage Mastery, which is a 12-month group program.
Oh, I want to hear about this male brain part. Yeah, we got to get into that.
That's really good.
I'm just super interested. How did you get into this profession?
Well, I think like most of us, it comes through our own struggle and our own journey. So I got married super young. I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And the stats for young marriage are just not very good. And there's a reason for them. It's because you're really not that, you're not the person yet. And you have a lot to learn, a lot of maturing to do. But thankfully, my husband and I fought through it. But we did have to seek a lot of help in order to make that happen. And one of the biggest things we fought about was sex. I didn't know that was something that couples even fought about. I thought you get married and everything just goes really well and no problem. But I just didn't really look forward to it. I didn't want it. My husband did not have that problem at all. And it was the biggest source of tension in our relationship. So I started going to probably about 5 years into our relationship. It kind of reached a real point, we had to get help. And the first counselor was super awkward. He asked me about masturbation. I didn't want to talk about it. It was just like, gross. And then he didn't really help. And I saw another sex therapist. She didn't really help. I read a ton of books. I just could not find the solution that was going to work for the long term. And I eventually actually trained as a marriage coach just because I started to do all that research and learning. And I started to work with couples. I still hadn't figured this out for myself, but I started to see all these other women who had this challenge as well. And I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I need to figure this out. So I just really dug into it. And I had the courage to create my own methodology, which worked for me very, very well. And then I started to help other women with it.
Now, a lot of our listeners are moms or they're busy entrepreneurs. Did this issue start before kids? Did it get worse after kids? How did that come into play?
That's a really great question. I actually find that usually, but it's really split 50-50. For me, I was of the type where I just never really had a big sex drive. But there are 50% of other women who come into the program have gone through some sort of life change, like having children or maybe going on some medication or whatever, or some grief. I mean, lots of things, right, can change our lives. And that's when things change for them. So it's really 50-50.
All right. And just tell the listeners, what type of programs do you offer? I know you offer the one-on-one, but what other type of programs do you offer?
So I have a program called 30 Days to Wanting It More, because when I did surveys, that's all I heard. They're like, I just want to want it, but I don't. And people who don't have that issue don't get it. They're like, well, if you wanted it, then why wouldn't you go for it? That doesn't make sense. So that's a self-guided program. And really, it is so much more than just solving that one problem. We have about 250 women in there, and we are kind of creating a new movement, like a new feminist revolution, which is super, super exciting. One that doesn't say, men are pigs and perverts and we could just ditch them, but really respects that men and women have been created differently and they bring different things to the table. So that's the self-guided program. Then I additionally work with couples one-on-one if they want a little more support, and I take them through the 30 days methodology. And then I have one more program called Marriage Mastery, which is, again, that 12-month group program where each month we take kind of a new focus on marriage, one that is really, really essential. And I give them a video each month, and then I give them a specific experiment, and then we have a one-on-one call.
Now, obviously you can't explain the whole methodology on this, but is there kind of like a brief summary of like phases that you kind of go through? I mean, is there tasks that they're having to do, different subjects they're having to think about? How does that work?
Yeah, well, where do I start? The biggest thing that differentiates what I do with what all the so-called experts out there do is, rather than focusing on external circumstances, so figuring out how to decrease your stress, getting you more exercise, eating the right food, all these are great things. But let's be real, like, we are busy. And if you wait for the perfect time for these to come all into alignment,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have sex like once every 6 months or something, you
Yeah.
know? The other thing other experts kind of focus on is just doing it, which is so unfortunate. I honestly had a client tell me that her therapist once told her that sex was just like kale, that it's good for you, and at some point you're going to enjoy it. So you just got to keep on eating it. It's
Oh
like,
God.
that so does not work.
That just sounds like horrible. Like, I'm like, really? What? Just keep
Yeah.
eating. Eventually you'll like it. Yeah.
Just keep eating. The other thing that people will focus on is the physical sensations. And while that is important, for most women, it just leaves them feeling unfulfilled and unsatisfied. And because we are living in this culture of distorted male sexuality, so if you look at media and anything you see, really, it's focused so much about orgasm. It's so focused so much about these specific sex acts that are kind of acceptable. So the focus is on performance rather than pleasure. And because women's sexuality is so expansive, most women are just missing out on so many exciting and intricate and detailed sensations that they're just kind of numbed out, quite frankly. So the biggest thing that I have women do is become the leaders of the sexual experience, which is in most cases a complete 180 from what they're experiencing. I mean, look at any sort of romance novel, and it's the guy who comes in and, he makes the woman quiver and shake, and she goes, oh, I don't know, where are those sensations coming from? I don't know. And it's all about, can you find a guy that's good in bed? And which is so ridiculous, because men are actually wonderful responders. And when men sometimes have a little struggle with this when they come into the program, but when I hear from them like 5-6 weeks later, they are singing praises of the 30 days methodology because it works so well.
I can imagine them going like, what? Someone's going to have to like coach me on what I'm supposed to do. So men are part of the program, right? They have to kind of be part of the program.
Well, I really believe that women are the spark of change in a relationship. I've seen it time and time again. It's women who are searching on Google late at night, how do I increase my libido? It's women who are reading the books. It's women who are searching out coaching and therapy. And so I created the program with that in mind. And I really do have the belief that if one person wants to change in a marriage, then the marriage can change. And if women are the spark, then I'm going to create a program for them. So I do that, but I coach women on how to speak to their husband. That's where the male brain comes in. I provide scripts, and I also do really short 10-minute videos for each module so that they can show those to their husband.
Okay. And besides all your programs, is there something, like if we have a mom that's listening today and she just listens to this podcast and tonight she goes home, is there one thing that someone could start doing daily to increase that connection with their partner? I mean, yes, sexually, but just I feel like it's all about increasing that connection, which ultimately sometimes leads to sex. So what is something that a woman could start doing daily to kind of go, okay, this is my first stepping stone?
Absolutely. So this might surprise you because it actually has nothing to do with sex and it has nothing to do with your husband. So what I want you to do is start taking responsibility for your needs, because there is nothing that shoots down libido quicker than resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that resentment is just unmet needs. And the quickest way that you can start doing that is prioritizing your pleasure. And this is a great thing to start doing before you get into the bedroom, because this is something that women don't usually do. They prioritize other people's needs, they prioritize productivity or getting stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily feeling good. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, it can be just something like right now I'm in my office and I can look out past the screen. Laura, your face is beautiful, but I can get a lot of pleasure from that. But just see the trees and just have like 2 seconds of pleasure, and even just tell my brain pleasure, like that feels good. That is
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful visual sensation. And if you start prioritizing your pleasure in your everyday experience, and when you're in your bed in the bedroom, you go into the bedroom with your husband, you're not coming into there in like a negative 130 or whatever, and then trying to rev up your engines. You are entering the bedroom not feeling resentful. Your pleasure nutrient needs have been met throughout the day. And so you can then bring another person into the experience.
That's awesome. I would have never thought that that's the first step. I would be like, oh, cook dinner, do something cute, like nice for the other person.
No,
But
because what I constantly am telling women, forget about your husband's needs. Forget about them. Focus on yours. Because especially when it comes to the bedroom, women are constantly thinking, is my husband having a good time? Is he bored? Or is this sexy enough? Do I sound so sexy?
which
Do I
is
look
so
sexy?
true. Yeah, like
Yeah.
we're never going like, well, this is how I feel about it. Like it's always we're really focused on the other person. I mean, that's how I feel a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's probably my biggest work. When I work with the women in the program or one-on-one, I do so much work, and which is crazy because when I have a couple with me, I have a husband and wife on the other side. I do all my coaching virtually,
Hmm.
and like I'll be talking to the wife and saying like, really, I need you to be very selfish here. I need you to think just about your pleasure and that's it. And the husband is nodding furiously like, yes, like that would be awesome. Then I don't have
Hmm.
to figure it out. I don't have to go through some sort of test to figure out the right thing that you need or what I'm supposed to do here, and I can just respond to you. It works so beautifully.
Now, do you ever run into though where the husbands kind of would get offended by being like by the woman saying, "Well, this you're not doing this right. I need you to do this instead." I think that's where women get a little scared or shy about it because they're like, "Well, I don't want him to get offended or get mad or that type of thing."
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat this and say that it's just like this easy process,
Yeah.
especially my methodology, which really works in the long term. It is a long term solution. So I'll often have men. I was actually just talking to a gentleman the other day about what it was like he's not a one on one client, but what it was like for his wife to go through the program and him to kind of go along. And he was like, in the beginning, it's like you crash down and you just, because suddenly wives are just actually being truthful and honest with their husbands about their experience. Like, I don't really look forward to it. And this thing you do, I don't really love. And,
Yeah.
I'd really prefer a back massage rather than a breast massage, like all of these things, which are true to them. And so it's like this whole other world is opened up to them. And men are affected too by the media. I mean, 93% of men watch porn, and
Yeah.
pornography is like incredibly damaging, not only to the brain and your dopamine and your, enjoyment of life, but the what you watch, that is
Mhm.
very, it's very demeaning to women. It's very aggressive. And when the wives come and they start to become more assertive and take the leadership role, it's usually a much more softer, slower, more connected experience. So,
Mhm.
but the great thing is if the women will stick with it and stay firm, when I talk to the men, like, you know, down the road, they are just singing the praises of this
Mhm.
program, and they just honestly are telling even their buddies about it, if you can believe it.
Yeah. Telling their buddies, like, you should have your wife go on this program.
Yeah.